Sometimes you come across a series that everyone and their mother tells you is phenomenal. This is the best thing they've ever read, sure to be the benchmark by which they compare all future series. Then you pick it up and find yourself completely underwhelmed, struggling to understand why everyone ignores all these flaws in something they term flawless. Hunter x Hunter is not one of those series for me. This is part 2 of looking at the Chimera Ant Arc. Last time we looked at some of the key ways this arc rocks your socks off and how I would completely understand if it was your favorite arc of all time. Today we're going to flip that coin and look at why I would also understand if you think this arc is way too overhyped and isn't anything special. Disclaimer that this video is going to be full of hot takes, but each one is a genuine criticism I have of this arc. Again, this is purely based on the manga, so where things deviate from the anime like pacing, we're only really concerned with the original story. Also, if I've just missed something that addresses the issue, I apologize profusely and just drop me a chapter reference in the comments. Thanks. Here's our main points, and let's crack in. The B plot. As engaging as the main plot is, I think there's a lot of unnecessary bloat in this arc. I know different people will consider the A plot differently, so here's how I define it. The ants become a threat and start spreading before the king is born, then the king is born and it's a deadlock between the ants and the hunters until the day of the selection, and then of course the assault on the palace. So what's the B plot? Well, everything to do with the division commanders running off to start their own colonies, and every single scene with Palm, except for one. Her role forms the basis of the main B-plot. She infiltrates the palace, fails, and then needs to get rescued by Kahlua and the octopus. When the tension's at its peak during the palace assault, we keep cutting from the interesting high-stakes plot, Gon and Pito, the Yuppie fight, Meruem, Netero, to the octopus walking around looking for Palm. And this doesn't really add anything to the story. It's incredibly jarring switching from the built-up tension of this essentially international threat to, yeah, I hope the octopus can sneak past. I don't think this really helps the arc at all. You could take Palm and the B-plot out, and the story would just flow so much better. To contrast, you might say that this is important and adds some valuable context to the arc. The human administrator shows this dark side of humanity, the octopus shows the humanity in the ants, and Palm herself adds a personal stake to the whole siege. But the arc has already set up all of these elements. We have the gun running in the NGL and the whole story around the poor man's rose, we have the chameleon to show the ants' redemption, and Palm doesn't really add any stakes to the arc. Gon's personal stake is entirely with Kite, which is necessary to set up this. Really, if you took Palm out of the arc, not much would change. Her arc-affecting actions are showing that the hybrids don't work and confirming the kill on Meruem, both which could have been achieved without the whole B-plot. Likewise, we can feel this bloat in a lot of the Division Commander's scenes after about the halfway point. The problem is the series has introduced a compelling A-plot where we want to spend our time, only to cut away. It's like being offered another round of appetizers when we've been ready for mains for a while now. Again, yes, in fairness, these facilitate different roles in the arc. Like, Zazan's is supposed to show how the ants are spreading, or more likely just as an excuse to include the Phantom Troop, and the others to provide that drain on the main cast. The problem is, the endpoint is already established. We know where we're going to end up with the assault on the castle. So it becomes so easy to lose engagement in these interim battles, because now they feel unimportant, and for the most part, they are. This really comes down to a pacing issue, which I know people will feel differently about. For me, I can rush through the chapters between the last Gon Knuckle fight and the start of the assault on the castle, stopping only for Meruem Kamugi scenes, because I know besides that, I'm not really missing anything important. Lackadaisical timing is kind of twofold. Firstly, the hunters don't really respect the threat despite the manga acknowledging it, and secondly, the big in-world pacing that really lost me, the 1 month pause. As the gang is traveling across the country before the selection, there's this very clear moment of Knuckle saying that they need to discuss if they need to bring in reinforcements. There's this idea of the hunters not taking this threat that seriously. The manga is doing this fantastic job of showing the ants as a genuine threat, even going so far as to say that the chairman would be cut down by the royal guards. But the hunters aren't acting accordingly. Yes, you need reinforcements. Despite Knuckle having this moment, they never have this discussion. If reinforcements are unavailable, there at least should be a passing comment about it somewhere down the line. It's one of those times I'm really glad I wasn't reading this on release, because it teases getting some of our favorite characters we haven't seen yet into this arc. But ultimately, it's just forgotten. They make a pretty darn risky plan to assault with who they've got, and at this time they don't even know about the poor man's rose, so it feels like a plan that's going to fail. Ooh, okay, actually, minor update. Chapter 234 explains why they can't get help from the Hunters Association. Pariston is being Pariston, and is most likely setting up for Netero to take a fall. But this is never really mentioned as a reason why they can't get help outside of this one chapter. Also, it's only Moreau and is it Nobu in this discussion, so Knuckle probably wasn't even aware of this. Okay, but what about the 1 month pause though? One of the great things this arc uses is time restraints as a way to add tension. The week leading up to the assault, the first few minutes in the attack. Pot Clean's ability is probably my favorite way this is seen in the arc. At the start though, the time limits get a bit wonky. It's 2 months until the expected birth of the king. Gon and Killua go train for a month before the showdown with Knuckle and Shoot, and then there is this month where absolutely nothing is achieved. The king is born as Gon's Nen is sealed for the month, the king goes off to the palace, Knuckle and Co have a brief run-in with the fast boy, Killua kills this guy, and in the whole month, that's all that we see. Why seal Gon's Nen for a month if the world does not change in that month? Gon suffers no consequences for having to wait. The hunters gain no ground on the ants, the king assumedly just hangs out in the palace for a month, not really doing anything, and then Gon just joins back in the fight right where they left off. What was the point? One of the great parts in this arc is the tension, but nothing kills tension quicker than all of the major players just sitting on their hands for a month while they wait for the main character to be ready again. This would have been a fantastic time for the arc to montage through the available hunters cleaning through the division commanders and confirming that they're not going to get any more help in the fight. As it stands now, just a really strange inclusion in the arc. This will probably be the hottest take in the video. Gon's power-up is not earned. And disliked. Okay, hear me out. I think Meruem's journey this arc is fantastic, and Gon's inverse journey of becoming darker is a great idea in the arc, it's just not executed overly well. It's primarily built on Kite's death, which is apparently a big deal for Gon. The problem is, us as the readers have not been shown the importance of this relationship. There's the interactions in the first chapter, then the starting chapters of the Chimera Ant Arc, and that's the entirety of the relationship. At the end, when Kite's confirmed dead, there's this flashback to Gon's memories of Kite, and there's only 4 panels that the series has to use. I've read a few reviews building up Kite as a surrogate father figure to Gon, Gon's father being the whole point of this journey. But again, the series has not shown that this is how Gon views him. I like the idea, but I honestly think that this is just what we do as readers to justify the transformation, because the series has not given us enough reasons on its own. Let's take a different take. What if it was Killua who had been the one who died? We've seen the depth of their friendship. This has been shown to us across the previous 100-something chapters. We know what Killua means to Gon. We could see Gon closing himself off more and more, because without Killua, he's surrounded by new people through this arc. We could also have Palm fulfilling Killua's role in the arc instead of a side plot, and we wouldn't even lose Killua because, I mean, we don't really lose Kite either. He just comes back as an ant. To have a big emotional transformation like this, we need a strong emotional base, and one is not established between Kite and Gon. The series reminds us every now and then that Gon's really upset, but we can't exactly understand why he's having so strong a reaction. I do have to admit though that I think I have a bias against Gon's change because I also think that this arc has mishandled 2 other character moments already, namely Killua's and the Octopodes. Killua has this early arc about learning to fight in situations where he doesn't know his opponent's strength. He normally runs away, which fits perfectly for an assassin, and it's summarized in the series by his brother's words running through his head when he gets into these situations, which again makes sense. His family have instilled this flaw in him. It's a learned flaw in his character that he needs to overcome. Eventually, by pushing himself to the brink, he finds the courage to stand and fight, because there are things in his life he would defend with his life, learning and growing past his character flaw. Except not. He never had the flaw. His brother just programmed him with a head spike and Killua just happened to find it and take it out. He never had the flaw, it was just a Nen ability, and by removing it, his character hasn't learned anything. He just removed a physical limit someone imposed on him. For the octopus, he's leading a gang of ants to kill Killua, and he lures Killua into a trap, intending to kill him. Killua runs down and presumably kills him before his true form is revealed, and then instead of giving away information, the octopus chooses to die. Killua then saves him, calling it a cool thing to do, and that's apparently all the octopus needs to hear to turn from killing and willing to die for his cause to being friends with Killua. The manga shows that it's not just returning the favor, it's a proper full-on character change. They're suddenly ride or die for each other. Again, this is a cool moment that doesn't have the emotional base to support it. You can't have characters have these big perspective-changing moments without an equally big reason for the change. Being called cool isn't enough to sell out a cause you were about to die for. Having a mentor that we've only seen a handful of scenes with die isn't enough to throw your life away in vengeance. While we can invent reasons why these make sense, it should be up to the series to show these reasons to us to make them work. Let's step back and take a broader look at how this arc fits into the greater Hunter x Hunter story. Despite the earlier criticisms, I really do think the Chimera Ant arc is great. Though, now we're going to look at the case for the arc being a great shonen, but not so much a good Hunter x Hunter arc. Firstly, let's talk about consequences. We get some fantastic fallout. The chairman is dead. This means a big change in the Hunter Association, which sets up the election arc and then flows through into the Dark Continent. Great. Gon gets his nen sealed permanently, a consequence that matches the explanation of the transformation. He spent all of his power. Yes, he should not have any more power after this. Fantastic. The ants are recognized globally, and some get taken in by essentially the military. Brilliant! Kite doesn't really die and kind of comes back as an ant? Okay, yep, no, this is still good. Gon finally meets his dad, and it's treated as not a big deal, okay? Killua brings out a new sibling that he totally had the whole time, who just happens to have the exact power needed to heal Gon. And her nen power is she literally grants wishes, covering any problems the arc could have left the story with? Okay, let's talk about the last one. Really, there is some mixed fallout to the arc, and Alluka in particular feels like such an awkward addition. She's not mentioned at all until after Chimera finishes, and her power is just exactly what is needed to help Gon. But nah, she's totally been here the whole time. This feels really close to a Deus Ex Machina. On the plus side, her ability sets up nen beasts and the Dark Continent stuff, great. But until then, it undermines the ending of the Chimera Ant arc. Gon is broken raw from the power-up, but Alluka can just fix him up. No worries, just no more nen for you, sir. It's like a character falling unconscious, and he can only be awoken by a mystical flower fabled to not even exist. And then another character just says, yeah, I have these at home, let me get like 10 chapters and I'll bring one. While I like the end result with not giving Gon his nen back, why make a big deal about how broken he is if it's just wiped away so easily? It trivializes the consequences. And Kite's not really dead?
Why?
The whole point of Gon's journey in this arc was based around that. Why is he back? King Gyro has this dark backstory and is set up as someone really important to the series. Much like this cut, Gyro comes out of nowhere. It's not led into at all, the series just randomly cuts to Gyro's history and then cuts right back into the story. Gyro has really no importance in this arc. For some context, he gets a few mentions at the end of the arc, but he hasn't shown up again since. Why is he here? Yes, he's abducted by the ants during the arc, so it should be a fine place to introduce him, but we need something to tie him into the story, not just hard cuts to a character completely unimportant to the arc. With the context of the rest of the series, this is all we've seen of him so far, which makes it even stranger. And then once he's been introduced, it just cuts back to the story like nothing had happened. Let's talk about the nen system, widely considered one of the best established shonen power systems. My question is, what is the king's nen spread? I have no idea either. The arc does not tell me. I can assume it's mostly reinforcement, but the series never seems to talk about it. I can understand that maybe Togashi just wanted to set up a character that was, simple shonen strong. He's fast and he hits hard. Though I don't think that's a good choice. You've set up this great power system where we can understand different strengths and weaknesses. Some of the best fights in the series has two people using their specific powers and spreads to find a win. See that Hisoka fight in chapter 351 for an example. So having one of your best villains completely removed from the power system feels like a misstep. Hunter x Hunter goes on to kind of overcorrect in the Succession War with a lot of characters having these very specific stand-style powers. We get walls of text explaining how things work, so maybe Togashi is still trying to figure out how he wants to use this system. As for the Chimera Ant arc, it works well in isolation, but its place in Hunter x Hunter is just not as strong as some of the other arcs. That felt like a lot of complaining. I don't mean it to be, I do really like the arc. Chimera Ant arc is my favorite of Hunter x Hunter so far, but I do feel like there are some genuine criticisms to be had. I know there'll be some points here that you probably disagree with me on, so let me know your thoughts in the comments. Good! Bad. Hopefully I've been able to reasonably explain my own thoughts here, and thanks for watching. This has been CG, and I'll see you G's in the next one.